Warren Buffett is stepping down as Berkshire Hathaway's CEO. Now, if you're not in the finance world, that probably means absolutely nothing to you. And I'll be honest, I'm not in the finance world, so it means absolutely nothing to me. I will say this, though. Warren Buffett does have one of the great quotes of all time where he said, you know what the difference is between cocaine and flying a private jet? You can quit cocaine. That's just a really great quote. I don't know the man, don't care either way, but either way, he's stepping down. I bet Carol cares, though. She probably knows all kinds of things. Joining me now, Carol Roth, 2 times New York Times best-selling author, which kind of sucks because I didn't even make it there once. Carol, why do I care about Warren Buffett? Why do you care about Warren Buffett? Is this a big deal?
It's a big deal within the finance community because Warren Buffett is the GOAT. He's the Michael Jordan of finance, so to speak. The most legendary investor of all time. And by the way, he is a sprightly young 94 years old and now just deciding to step aside as CEO. By the way, he's still going to be chairman because he doesn't want to get completely out of the game. But even though we might not agree with his politics, Jesse, there's a lot that we probably really like about Warren Buffett, you and me, because this is a guy who eats McDonald's every day. He has a Coke every day. He eats Dairy Queen. He doesn't work out. And 94, he's, a gajillionaire, multi-billionaire. And by the way, he's made a bunch of Midwestern normies completely incredibly rich over his time period. So he's been a big deal, and it really is a changing of the guard. He had a longtime partner named Charlie Munger, who, if you like Warren Buffett's quotes, you'd like Charlie's even better. He passed away in November of 23 at 99, by the way, was still working at that point in time. And so I think that, not having his partner in crime probably weighed a little bit on him. And by the way, I give Warren Buffett credit for piecing out, and stepping down right before we go into a global financial reset. So excellent timing on that, Mr. Buffett, and certainly have learned a lot from you over the years, although completely disagree with your politics.
Okay, Carol, before we even move on to anything else, you're going to give everybody a business world breakdown, if you will, CEO versus chairman. In the Carol Roth world, this makes sense. But for most people, both these guys sound like they're in charge. What does this mean?
So the CEO, the chief executive officer, is somebody who is running the business on a day-to-day basis. Overseeing the company and the CEO, there is a board of directors, and they deal with more, instead of operational issues, things like governments and higher, more macro strategic issues. So he will remain on as the head of the board, the chairman, in a non-day-to-day role, a supervisory role, a role that, people can go to, whether it's the CEO or other C-level executives, and get some advice, but he is not going to be making the day-to-day investment decisions for the company any longer.
See, that's the role I want. I don't want any responsibilities. You can pop into my office. I'll make a generous paycheck, and I'll give you some guidance, but I don't want to actually be held to account for anything.
I'll tell you, my father was an electrician, and over time he became the superintendent, and he said he would sit in his shanty all day long, and people would come to him. He would just tell them what to do, and, he'd listen to the radio or whatever. So I feel like if you're, more of a blue-collar person, the superintendent on a job is like being the chairman of the board.
Yeah, our superintendents were always like that, sitting in the truck smoking cigarettes while we were in the ditch. That was pretty much it.
God bless.
All right, Carol, what does this mean? Does it mean anything for normal people? I know in the finance world it's news, and I get that. It's Warren Buffett. But is this going to hurt me or help me in some way? Should I take anything from this at all?
No, not unless you're a shareholder of Berkshire stock. It was down significantly on the news, even though, the guy's 94 years old. You'd think that information would probably be baked in, that he'd be leaving at some point. But, unless you are somebody who's just a student of the market or of people who are great at their jobs or a finance nerd, no, it doesn't really impact you in any way, shape, or form. But it's a great learning. He's a very simple guy, by the way. As we talked about the McDonald's and stuff, but doesn't send email, does a lot of reading. Really just kind of a back to basics kind of guy. So worth looking into, but not going to move the needle on your life one way or another.
He did have this to say about the tariffs. Here he was.
Oh, and there's no question that trade can be an act of war. and I think it's led to bad things. Just the attitudes it's brought out in the United States. I mean, we should be looking to trade with the rest of the world, and we should do what we do best, and they should do what they do best. I do not think it's a great idea to try and design a world where a few countries say, ha, 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 we've won, and other countries are envious. Trade should not be a weapon. I do think that the more prosperous the rest of the world becomes, it won't be at our expense. The more prosperous we'll become, and the safer we'll feel, and your children will feel someday.
Carol, I can love a lot of that and hate a lot of that, and I most definitely do. But I think my point with a lot of these arguments is the free traders sure sound like they don't care if we win, and the protectionists, they sound like commies a lot in this whole thing. I have a very difficult time finding picking a side, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that I'm somewhat neutral. I think that there are times when it makes sense and times when it doesn't make sense. You have to remember, in terms of our own economic growth, it's not the only tool that we have. I'm somebody who likes to drive incentives and use the carrot when possible instead of the stick. But I'm with you. The fact of the matter is that we are now hearing a lot of folks that sound like commies. We had the president who was on Sunday morning shows saying that, we can only have $2 and 5 pencils, and that's good enough. And that sounds a lot like Bernie Sanders, not, President Trump and, the right-leaning people who want to have economic growth. So it's very frustrating. And the other thing I'll say to you, Jesse, is that in March of 2020, I came on your show and we talked about the dangers of COVID. And you and I were two of the early and consistent voices that talked about COVID over and over again. And we are now looking at COVID 2.0. We're hearing that certain businesses aren't essential. We're seeing that big companies like Apple are getting exemptions for smartphones and chips and computers, and small businesses are saying, get out of here. So we're seeing the same issues pop up again, and we know what the long tail impacts are. But yet, for whatever reason, the people who are on one side are now on the other side, and vice versa. And it just feels like a very frustrating, bizarre world.
Carol, I know this is not a simple issue, so I don't want to simplify the issue, but are they making it too complicated? And I say that because I can't figure out, I do this for a living. I can't figure out even what's been tariffed and what's about to be tariffed and what tariff got delayed, but there's a new tariff, but that tariff isn't coming into, but now what's going on?
First of all, it's hard to know what exactly the objective is, because we keep hearing different objectives, and those are all in conflict. We're doing this to raise money, but no, we're doing this for fairness. Okay, well, if you get fairness and everybody removes their barriers, then we're not going to get as much money. So which is it? The same thing with reshoring. I'm hearing that, the middle class is hollowed out and we need to bring back jobs when we have hundreds of thousands of skilled trade jobs that are currently not being filled. So it would seem to me that if you wanted the middle class to thrive and you wanted more people in those jobs, you would have incentives for training for electricians and plumbers and HVAC technicians and machinists in manufacturing, because we have hundreds of thousands of open manufacturing jobs, instead of, okay, well, let's put small businesses out of business and somehow think that that's going to, come up with some sort of objective. So it's very difficult when you don't know what the problem is that you're trying to solve to come up with the objective. And at the 145% level, that is not a tariff, that is prohibition. Nobody can do business under those terms.
Okay, so why hasn't the market really reacted yet, Carol? We had a couple of days it was down, then it's back up, then it's down. What's going on with the market? And I asked that for everybody with their 401k in an app on their phone who wakes up checking it, dreading it every day.
So there are a lot of things. If you go back to December, again, I was on your show and told you, by the way, the Buffett indicator that the market was overvalued in terms of the size of the market to GDP. And then we had the market sell off. So it was overvalued at that point in time, and there was a sell off. And then the tariffs accelerated that. Over the last month, we have seen the rebound of a portion of that, the quote unquote Liberation Day drop off, but not the stuff that happened in the February-March timeframe. And I think we're still down 6 or 7% from that. My take is that when you have Scott Bessent, who is very smart, U.S. Treasury Secretary, out trying to calm the markets, he's giving the signal that there are deals that are coming to fruition. And the market is giving the administration credit. They're basically saying, we think that the worst part of this is behind us, that there's going to be no more escalation in the near term, and that we'll see de-escalation, and they're giving them credit. The longer this goes on without something concrete, and by the way, it's been more than a month, and we have not seen one glorious deal yet. So the longer this goes on, the less credible that is. And there's also a thing with the market. The market always pays more for probabilities than for realities. So when it's a probability, they don't know what it is to judge, and they can't put a metric on it. When there's a reality, then they could go, well, that's not good enough, and then put a metric on it. So I do think we're going to have a lot more volatility this year. And the longer this goes on, it also threatens the health of the economy. It threatens small businesses being able to exist, which runs through the whole economy. So we need to get some clarity here real quickly. And I think the best thing the administration could do is be more surgical and focus on really the important areas, things like defense and shipbuilding and pharmaceuticals. They should exempt small businesses. They should focus on training people for the jobs that we have. We should remove some of the regulation that is stifling growth. We should get the tax cuts cemented and do things that are going to remove barriers instead of creating this confusion and putting up barriers, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward here.
That was a lot. I feel so much smarter, though. Thank you, Carol. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.